Hi, and welcome to this AI in C# video on the Microsoft Agent Framework. And today we're going to talk a little about the fact that there is something called an AI agent and something called a chat client agent. And what is the difference between the two? And in general, why is there so many different agents and clients, and how do they all relate? And this is a fairly complex topic. We can take the short version or we can take the long version of this. So if you just want to know, should I use one or the other? Then the short version is, if you don't need structured output, you should use an AI agent. AI agent is the one that can do it all. If you need structured output and you have the option to get a chat client agent instead, do so, because it has an extra method that makes structured output much easier. And if you can't get the chat client agent from above, mostly likely due to middleware like OpenTelemetry or function calling filters, then you need to either use the Comparison structured output variant, or you can use my AI agent extension method that is part of the sample repo. That actually makes AI agent able to do the less cumbersome version of structured output by going in and wrapping it in some code. But if you want the long version, then hang tight, because this is gonna be nerdy. So here in the system, I have under settings and configuration a project here called the different agents. And as such, we're not going to run any LLMs and so. We're only newing up agents and clients. And what we have is, we have, of course, the raw clients. So we have the OpenAI client and the Azure OpenAI client. Behind the scenes, they are actually exactly the same code, just with a different constructor, so it can ask for an endpoint up front. But beyond that, they actually work exactly the same and can do the same as such. There's also the Azure AI Foundry Persistent Agent Client, which is unique to that service and requires this special endpoint and using Azure CLI credentials. So if you don't use AI Foundry, you don't need this agent client at all. Then there's something called an iChat client. iChat client is actually from Microsoft Extensions AI, and is being used heavily behind the scenes. And it's also the one that you use when you don't have an OpenAI provider, like, for example, Gemini or Claude and so on. While they can not give any AI agent, they can give an iChat client, and an iChat client can be turned into an AI agent. So that is the reason why they work, because there's an extension method on top of iChat client. So those are the different clients by themselves. What you can then do is, you can turn all of these into AI agent. It's an abstract class that by itself can't do anything. It just tells us that we have to run async and to run streaming async. And that's more or less the only thing you can do, other than the agent thread and so on. So if we want to take the OpenAI client and get a chat client, we can get that as an AI agent. We can also get the response client as an AI agent. We can get the persistent client as an AI agent based on one of the agents that are up in the cloud. In this case, I'm just creating it on the fly. Or if we have the chat client agent, we can put that into an AI agent and get it out as a AI agent here. So everything can become an AI agent. However, if we do exactly the same code, so these lines of code down here and these are the same, they're just newing them up as a chat client agent behind the scenes. All of these, let's see if we say create, you can actually see that they create chat client agents when they are called. So we can just as easily get them as chat client agents. So no problems there. And that is good because it has one more method. It has a run async with a take in an object, which should be the structured output. This is incredibly easy to work with compared to the AI agent where you need to give it a response format and all kinds of things. So whenever I'm able to do it, I always use chat client agents to run everything because they behind the scenes they are actually that. And chat client agents is special behind because everything that happens inside a chat client agents uses the iChat client behind the scenes. So that is all the things you do whenever you use the system like that. So whenever you can go with a chat client agent, in my opinion. But there is some scenarios where you can't do that, and that is when you use middleware. So the middleware is where you say make your agent, which is a chat client agent, and then you say as builder, and then use something, and then build. This always gives back an AI agent. It will never give back a chat client agent or any other type of agent. And that sets the run async out of the question, which was what I meant by if you can't make a chat client agent. So these agents down here, if I tried to write chat client agent here, I couldn't do that. If I tried to cast it as one of them, it wouldn't work either. Because whenever we do things like this, we can see down here, we get that an agent like that is something called a delegating agent. So, and a delegating agent doesn't really have anything more advanced. In this case, you see as enable sensitive data, but beyond that, you don't see anything. And that is actually not even on a delegated agent, but I will show that in 1 second. So the function calling agent is also a delegating agent, which just means that it's not based on iChat client, it's based on something more internally that needs to do more, like, for example, call OpenTelemetry or do function calling middleware behind the scenes. So it's delegating the work to an inner AI agent. There's also something called anonymous delegate agent, but it's internal, so we can't really see that it's doing anything, but it is the one that actually does something when you say as builder. It can also show that the middleware, if the middleware, for example, is OpenTelemetry, you can get it as an OpenTelemetry agent, and that is the one that had this extra enable sensitive data. You normally knew that up during the creation of the agent, so you don't really need it here. But you can technically make an OpenTelemetry agent. I can't see a reason why you should, but it is possible to do it like that. The same goes for the AI agent with function calling, but it is actually something called a function invocation delegation agent, meaning it will do before and after of the function calling, so you can control if the function call should happen or not, or log some data on it. But it's an internal class, so you can only see it if you go and download the source code of Agent Framework. But we can see it here if we look at this, and it shows it's a Microsoft Agents AI function invocation delegation agent. Why the OpenTelemetry agent is public and this one is internal. Don't really know. I can't see a reason why they should have one internal and another public. Beyond that, you also have the option to build something called an OpenAI chat client agent. I have no real reason why you should ever do that, but it is possible. But again, it just have exactly the same data and it just have an inner agent. But it is technically a delegation agent and not a chat client agent. So it won't give you the benefits of structured output and stuff. In the same manner, you can take the response client agent. So again, I would argue that these could become internal and just be used behind the scenes by the agent framework. There's also something called a Copilot Studio agent. I haven't commented in here because I haven't researched yet how it works. But Copilot Studio is this thing from Microsoft that drives the Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, not the GitHub Copilot, but the Microsoft 365 Copilot. And for such an agent, you would be able to have one of those that can integrate into that. And finally, there's something called an AI host agent, which I can't really find any. There's no examples. The same with Copilot Studio. They don't have any examples on it. But it's something to use to agent framework. But what you can essentially do is you can just new up one of your client agents and give a in-memory store, thread store, and then you get a hosting client. But again, it doesn't bring any further value to you. There's also two other internal agents, so you can't new them up, but there's a workflow host agent. That is when you take an entire workflow and turn it into an agent. It technically becomes one of those. But it's just behind the scenes as an AI agent, so you can't really interact with anything extra on it. But it's there. And then there is the A2A agent, which is what the A2A protocol uses to turn an A2A client into an agent. But again, behind the scenes, it's internal, and you just see it as an AI agent. So to summarize what this all means, well, again, if you can get a chat client agent, I would always try to do that because you certainly might need a structured output. If not possible, then get an AI agent and live with the more cumbersome structured output or my extension method. And forget the rest of them. Now you know they're behind the scenes, they are newing everything up, they are it's just base classes beyond base classes beyond base classes that goes down to get the clients. But behind the scenes, you only really need the AI agent for the few scenarios without structured output and a chat client agent for the rest. So that is actually everything in here. Hope it made a bit more sense, but if it doesn't, don't sweat too much over it. Just know that you go with the chat client agent and you have all the capabilities that you need. And if you know that you need more, it's probably because it's so an advanced scenario that you don't even need this video. So that's everything. See you in the next one.